I would like to formally submit my application.
Application for what? You're a tiny little baby owl.
To be a monster.
You want to officially be a monster.
Who?
You?
Yes, me.
You realize that means that someone may come to hunt you, right?
I can hold my own.
You can?
My own eggs? Who?
You?
Now you got it.
Ladies, gentlemen, and monsters of all ages, with Sunbreak releasing after months and months of hype, we have finally an understanding of the true scope of this expansion, at least before the title updates hit. And speaking of the title updates, the first of those is due to happen in August, and so I thought before this happens, I might just have a little chat with you about my feelings on the 17 new monsters in the base game before more are added to shake that up. Monsters are one of the most important parts of our experience when playing Monster Hunter games, and generally speaking, I think that Capcom totally knocked it out of the park this time around with the new creatures, and even the returning creatures put in the game. They're all amazing, but today I'm going to put them all in a tier list against each other. This means I'm comparing them between each other, so if a monster is on a lower tier, it doesn't mean I think it is a bad monster overall by any means, just that it isn't quite as good as the other ones that were added. Again, the bar for this expansion was set extremely high. Without further ado then, let's come on into the C tier, which is the lowest tier I'll be using today, and it only has one monster within it, Aurora Somnicanth. This monster is lots of fun, but honestly it left me personally just a bit disappointed. Original Somnicanth was mostly a sleep monster and had a fun little extra mechanic of taking out shells from the water to use as either flash bombs or blast shells to use as little explosives. It was a really cool part of her personality that I quite enjoyed. Aurora Somnicanth loses the shells, loses the sleep, and becomes a fully ice-based monster. I think that what we got is really cool aesthetically and very thematic with its own fight. It's like a bit of a banshee, but every time that I see it, I can't help but think it would be a way better experience if the monster was both, ice and sleep, or if it still used the shells in some new creative way that is different. As a result, this one sort of disappointed me, at least relative to the other monsters in the expansion. It was good, but I can just see a direct path in my mind to how it could have been great.
Wish I could have done more.
Moving up to the B tier, let's start with Magmadron. This concept is pretty cool. The idea of base Almadron being that he secretes a golden liquid that just turns ground into mud so he can swim wherever he wants is awesome. And this creature is essentially just that, but instead of liquid gold, he has some sort of superheated liquid that just straight up turns volcanic rock into magma. It is a very good idea, but it winds up being a very similar gimmick to base Almadron. In my opinion, it removes some of his uniqueness. The idea of using liquid gold to make ground mud is awesome. The idea of just being very hot, so now ground is magma, is cool, but it's just sort of not that unique even within the Monster Hunter series, especially in a series where fire-based monsters are by far the most dominant element, and in a game that unfortunately had 3 out of the 4 subspecies that were added be fire-based as well. I have nothing against a fire monster done well, but when you oversaturate an expansion with fire monsters, it makes it a lot harder for them to stand out. This fight is pretty good. This placement is mostly just because I prefer the ecological mechanics behind regular Almadron here. After that comes Furious Rejang. It was extremely unexpected to see him pop up in the game in the first place, especially in the particularly late spot that he holds in the MR rankings, but I just wasn't really excited by him showing up. I've always personally preferred base Rejang, and while Furious has some new abilities in Sunbreak that are nice, not a single one makes me like him all that much more. He is a good monster, but very underwhelming when you first fight him, and I just don't prefer him much personally. Rounding off the B tier, we have Pyrerakne Kadaki. This monster I have sort of gone back and forth on a little bit. I love the idea of taking the concept of the baby spiders on a string and changing the string from being a movement tool to using it as a fuse for explosives. It's a great concept. I love the way that it will sometimes run at you with its head backwards. It's super freaky and sort of scary, but again, the expansion is oversaturated with fiery subspecies, and this is one that is a part of that, especially when the base version of Rakne Kadaki is fire. Yes, I know this one is technically blast and fire, but blast is just fire with extra steps, and I was hoping that there would be a bit more variety in the subspecies than we actually wound up with. If we look at the monster by itself though, it is great as a creature, and the moveset from the most part is just really cool. I just don't really like it better than regular Rakne Kadaki overall, especially considering this one was introduced after the fact. When I saw the little guys roaming around the map earlier called the Pyrantulas, I got it totally in my head that we could get a new large monster that was like the male equivalent of Pyrerakne Kadaki and be a totally unique thing. So maybe it is partially my own fault for giving myself higher expectations, but Pyrerakne Kadaki just didn't leave anywhere as big an impression in my head as her predecessor.
I'm sorry, I had to downgrade our cable.
After that, let's start the A tier by finishing off the subspecies then with Bob, Blood Orange Bashan. I absolutely love the base monster. Once again, Bashan himself is awesome, and this guy is excellent too. I love the exploding pine cones and the way that he uses them like spinning tops. Sometimes it's just awesome, but as much as I put him in the A tier, he was one tiny mechanic away from being an S tier monster for me. With base Bashan, he throws fruit, and if you knock him down while he's about to throw the fruit, you can pick up the fruit yourself. It goes into your inventory and you can use it for yourself. I absolutely love that mechanic. It is ingenious, it is unique, nothing else does it, and I'm not too sure why it isn't replicated here in some way. These pine cones don't seem to explode on their own. As far as I can see, they are primed by Bob before being thrown, so if we knock Bob down before he throws them, why can't we pick up the pine cones and throw them back at him? I get that it isn't as simple as a fruit, which literally will just pop on impact, but quite possibly my favorite mechanic of base Bashan just didn't come through to the subspecies here at all. So while I absolutely adore the creature that we got, and I think it is definitely the best of the new subspecies for me, I just wish I could have had this tiny little extra thing for him to shoot it to the top of the monster list for myself. Next up then is Espinas, the first monster to come to the main series from Frontier in a long time, the flagship of Frontier, and an absolutely excellent fight in Sunbreak. It starts asleep with super hard scales, and as you fight and it gets angrier, it heats up and makes itself more vulnerable to damage. It charges all over the place, it uses his horn excellently, and it can apply multiple statuses in a single projectile. This thing can wipe the floor with you, and it doesn't do it with ridiculously fancy moves, it does it with simple efficiency. I know some people are less inclined to enjoy the fight, but I actually think the fight is quite fun. I think the monster looks incredible, it fits the locale, and I am ecstatic to have another Frontier monster in the main series, with all of the doors that could open for future Frontier monsters coming as well. Then comes Gore Magala. This legendary creature has been asked to return since the first time it showed up in the series, and its fight in Sunbreak is awesome and worthy of the time it had to wait. It has a lot more ranged abilities, the most notable of which being just sending expanding balls of frenzy, almost like a charge blade doing super amped element discharge. Its aesthetic is incredible as always, especially with the animated effect of his wings this time around, and when he goes darkness mode and the entire environment gets dark around him, it's just an incredible feeling to be hunting. Afterwards is Shagaru, the same monster but older.
I find nepotism repulsive.
Again, this monster got a fantastic visual update in Sunbreak, but the moveset got quite the change too, most notably adding in full-on frenzy laser beam. This is awesome to actually see in the fight, it's fun to play around, especially when it goes into bright old star mode, and both of these two monsters, the Magalas, are honestly just enjoyable hunting experiences. Sometimes returning monsters feel like they're just done for the sake of it, Rathalos, but both of the Magalas got some nice upgrades. They're fun to face, and just generally deserve these high-ranking spots on this list for me. Then we have Soregios. Soregios looks absolutely incredible in Sunbreak, one of the best-looking monsters in the entire game as far as I'm concerned. When I saw him in old game graphics, I always just imagined him as a sort of pale yellow and red, a neat color scheme but nothing crazy. However, in Sunbreak, it's quite clear that he is in fact a beautiful metallic gold, which also explains the sharpness of his scales somewhat. On top of that, when he gets angry and his scales split out, you can actually see into his body now just a little bit. Maybe I worded that weird, but I have to say that visually upgrading Seregios has done absolute wonders for him in my opinion. I think he's a way better monster than I used to, and I think that his fight fits his personality and reputation excellently. The only reason that he isn't in the S tier for me personally is that I just find his fight somewhat annoying. I accept that it is a good fight, that it fits him, and mechanically it is just a good fight. I accept that it has fun moments, but I just spend a lot of time chasing him around the place, and that annoys me a bit sometimes. Finally then in the A tier we have the flagship monster, Malzeno. This monster is excellently crafted, full on vampire aesthetic, and a lot of the visuals of the creature that we see itself are actually just curios clinging onto it, which I think is an incredible design decision. This creature adds Blood Blight, which is a ton of fun to play around as a status, but for me this one just comes down to a personal chip on my shoulder. I can understand why other people would say this monster is S tier, he is just barely below it for me, and my personal reasoning is aside from the new status, I just struggle to see much uniqueness in this creature. When I watch his moveset, I just see bits and pieces from other monsters already in the game put together, which is especially noticeable because they put the Magalas in the game, and Malzeno sort of does the wing slams like they are wing arms in a very similar animation. combination. The air dash move is really cool and is unique, but just about everything else I can track to being a part of a different monster added together and then called a new one. Aesthetically, lore-wise, perfect. Moveset is, for me personally, just missing a little bit of uniqueness, a little bit of oomph. Then finally we get to the S tier of monsters in Sunbreak, and well, it's quite well populated this time around. First up is Scorned Magnamalo. I think this monster is a direct improvement upon base Magnamalo. Visually, I prefer it 1000%. The more rugged appearance, the scarred eye, the fact that it doesn't get a back erection when it's angry, all of it makes me appreciate this creature more. I love that it has these red explosive attacks when it gets particularly mad as well. They look really freaking cool, really just giving it a little bit more of something special, more his own. It takes everything that high rank Magnamalo had and it makes it even better. It has massive claw explosions permeating throughout the ground, and its giant wicked arm blades look great to me.
That's not a knife. That's a knife.
After that comes the final boss of the game, Gaismagorm. I think this creature is an incredible spectacle monster and the best final boss we've seen in a while. I have a personal soft spot in my heart for Shar Ishvalda, but that comes more from the reveal of Rock Golem to Tree Demon than anything. I love that fight, and on repeat fights, I think this one might just be a better monster objectively speaking. The first time that you fight it, you get the extra spectacle of having Pyrerakne with you and her heroics. Of course, there's the fact of the cutscenes beforehand where you just see it getting impaled by multiple Dragonators and barely seeming to care. Then during the fight, there's the fact that it takes multiple Dragonators again and still barely seems to care. The sheer intimidation factor of this monster is nearly unmatched, the power level that you can see just emanating from it. The fight is incredible and I still enjoy it upon repeat hunts. The visuals are just hellish, exactly as intended, and the story of the game culminating with this creature is just a perfect way for it all to come together in the end. Then we move on to my favorite type of monsters, the crabs. Starting with Daimyo Hermitar, I love the crab monsters. I think of all the type of the monsters, they're just the most unique. There are other games out there where you can hunt dinosaurs, other games out there where you can hunt dragons or giant wolves or big insect spiders type of things, but how many games can boast a giant enemy crab? Very, very unbelievably few. Daimyo was done so much justice in Sunbreak that even being the literal first monster of the game, I adore every part of his fight. They brought him back and they did it excellently, and if you actually look at him up close, even his individual scales look incredible. They put so much effort into the detail of these creatures, and they made sure that the crabs, when they came back strong, and it does not go underappreciated by any means. Daimyo is a top tier monster, especially in his Sunbreak return. Then comes Shogun Ceanataur. Again, I love the crabs, and Shogun is just an even more creative crab, extending his claws out lengthwise to use as a razor rather than a snipping tool. The water coming out of the back of the shell is awesome in the fight and terrifying when you work out what is happening ecologically. And if you want to respect this monster and hold your respect for this monster, I recommend never, ever, ever breaking its shell. However, that said, that shell break is a prime example of how much ridiculous, insane detail went into crafting these monsters' return for Sunbreak. I mean, some poor unfortunate soul spent literal hours rendering Shogun's, and my heart goes out to them. Then we have Astalos. This monster had possibly the greatest glow up of anything in this expansion, literally. A returning monster who absolutely deserved to return, and visually is now just absolutely insane. I love the way this monster looks in Sunbreak, how reflective and bright it is, how well it just fits the way that it was imagined from the beginning. The attacks that it uses really just make it look even better in combat, and not only did it get back all of its original attacks with some extra flavor, it even picked up a couple of moves from Bolt Reaver, its deviant in Generations Ultimate. Overall, the fight is incredibly fun. It isn't overly challenging, it isn't overly repetitive, he has a varied moveset and is just one of the prettiest monsters I've ever seen now that we have him in this expansion. After that, we have the two remaining creatures, and you probably know what they both are. I go back and forth day by day, which one of them is better in my head, which is why today I'm happy this is a tier list, so I only have to say that I view them nearly equal to each other. First, I'll be talking about Garangolm. This giant Frankenstein's monster golem gorilla is just so damn cool. I love monkey monsters, I love big monsters, and he is both of those. After you fight him for a bit, he digs his arms into the ground and pulls out two different kinds of rock armored gauntlets to use as two different elements, and that is just a ton of fun. Fight him some more, and eventually he'll start covering his head in the same stuff and changing his moveset even further. He is slow and lumbering, but incredibly highly damaging, and then he pulls out a rocket jump just because he can. It doesn't feel ridiculous, it just feels smart, it feels well designed, and I love it. He looks great, his moveset is fun and inventive, unique, and I just love the creature as a whole. Then finally today is going to be Lunagaron. What an inspired monster. As soon as I saw it, I had a general idea what it could do, and yet I never truly believed that they would make a Fanged Wyvern that basically transitions to Fanged Beast mid-fight, and yet they did. Its skin almost looks like solid ice with some metal flavoring to it. It's just awesome. It grows these super gnarly ice claws, which again are incredible, and then when it gets angry it starts glowing red and moving particularly quickly, but the thing that really makes it take the cake for me once again is the fact that for part of the fight it stands up on two legs and essentially fully changes monster classes. It's like if you were using dual blades for the entire fight against a monster, then the monster fell asleep and you just stuck the two dual blades together, called it a greatsword, and did a massive wake up hit. Except in this case, it actually makes sense to the creature that we are seeing. Playing off the narrative of the werewolf, it almost makes more sense than not having it do this, and yet it's still a moment that struck me with awe and made me so happy when I first saw it, and it still makes me incredibly happy even now, a month later. As I said in the beginning of this, I genuinely think that every monster in Sunbreak is incredible. They're all top tier, even the returning ones. The bar has been set so extremely high, and I struggle to separate the top bracket of monsters because I think they're all just insanely high quality. I, for one, absolutely cannot wait for the title updates to come if this is what we were given in just the base game. The expectations have been set extremely high, and I totally believe that Capcom both can and will smash that out of the park. Let me know what you all think of my tier list, what monsters that you think are in the wrong spots, and why you think that. But at the end of the day, this is my tier list, not yours, so you know, it's always going to be based on my personal opinions. Like if you like the video, subscribe to the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.